Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 74 of Paranormal Pendle, broadcasting to the Paranormal UK network at paukradio.com. I'm absolutely delighted to have a very special guest with me, again from across the big ocean. We almost had a problem with the time zones again, but we've we've managed to sort it out. So here we are. Dr. Irena Scott, PhD, welcome. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm really interested in wanting to speak to you about the work that you've done, both independently and with my good friend Philip Mantle. I'd like to speak to you, obviously, about the books that you've collaborated with him. But before we start, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, just a sort of very brief bio about who you are and what you're all about?
Well, my career was in science. It wasn't in ufology. I have a PhD in veterinary medicine. Um, I was a professor and I worked at Cornell for a postdoc. I also worked, before that, I also worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency, and I was at GS-11, and I worked on satellite photography, and one part of it was identifying airplanes. I worked for the, I forget what it's called now, the mapping agency as a physical scientist. I've also been an astronomer at the Big Air Telescope. It's the one that discovered the wow sound. I
Oh,
worked at Battelle Memorial Institute. I've been at Wright-Patterson and in the Blue Room of Wright-Patterson.
okay.
And I worked for Popular Mechanics, writer and photographer.
So you mentioned the wow signal. Were you involved in that in any capacity, or did you just were you just there at the sort of same time?
No, I was just working there. But it wasn't at the time I was working there, but I knew everybody and um, worked with them and everything.
Yeah.
But
So what I'm interested in that actually to be honest with you, because obviously it's quite a big thing. And of course we've got some massive conspiracy theories flying around at the minute about Three Eye Atlas, which I'd be quite interested in your thoughts on what that is. But did you speak to anybody who was involved then in the detection of the WOW signal? And if so, what was their reaction like? What was the whole atmosphere like when they came across it?
well, the whole atmosphere was that um, the readout just was like a few numbers and things, but this was so intense that it went into the letters and way up, and it curved back down, and the way it behaved, it was a real signal. It didn't come from anything that they could find near, uh, like a satellite or anything. And they kind of pinpointed the area, but they didn't get the same, they didn't ever get it again.
Hmm.
Um,
So that would suggest then that it wasn't a naturally occurring sort of radio signal or something like that.
no. There's about every 2 months or so, somebody comes up with a new theory, but so far, none of them have panned out.
No. Do you have a theory? I'm putting you on the spot now.
Well, I heard a theory not too long ago about these. I think it's called Oumuamua, and there's another one coming up, 13 Atlas or something that's from other, from not from our solar system that come through from space.
Uh,
And just, I was saying maybe one of those things were coming through. I mean, back when that happened, um, nobody knew about that type of thing that they didn't have the tracking and everything they have now. Maybe something like that was going through and sent a signal.
uh.
I mean, that's a theory I thought I'd put out. I don't know if I
Yeah,
made
no,
it or
it's as good
not.
a theory as any other, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
nobody really knows at all what it is. do you have any theories at all about this 31 Atlas? Because obviously there's a lot of conspiracy theories. One is that it's an alien mothership and we're all doomed and we're all going to be taken over by aliens before Christmas.
Well, one of the people in Pascagoula had a prediction that we're going to terminate in 2025, but I hope not.
Oh dear. Who was that then? Who had?
I was just joking, but somebody said that, but I won't
All
go
right.
into it.
Well, I was going to say if I don't need to buy any Christmas presents, let me know now.
Yeah.
I'll save some money. Um, let's have a sort of quick move on then to Pascagoula because obviously I've been having a look at your website. You've done quite a few collaborations with Philip Mantle of Flying Disc Press, a few books. There's a recent one just come out as well, which you've written the forward for. Let's go all the way back to 1973. There may be people who are listening to this that don't know too much about what happened at Pascagoula, and that particular incident. So, could you sort of give us a summarization of how you see what happened that night?
Yeah. They were just two people, two men. One was older and one was younger, and that was because the younger man was a friend, was his father was a friend of the older man, and they were family friends.
Yeah.
And they had been working, and they went out fishing after work, which is something you do in Mississippi because there's all kind of water over there. And they were on an old beat up pier. They looked several other places and um, not found good fish. And so they found this one place and they were happily sitting there fishing. And this thing came. And I mean, they had no interest in UFOs or anything else. They weren't UFO people, or they were just normal human beings. And this UFO came close and it appeared, they described it kind of large in some places. And there was a blue light. And um, the younger man, he was driving his new car. And when they stopped, it said no trespassing. And he said, I don't want to go in, but they went anyway. And so when they saw this blue light, they thought it was the police. And he said, you can go to jail. It was your fault. And so then they uh, stopped joking because this thing, there was a blast of light like it came out of the thing. And things came out and grabbed him. Two grabbed the older man and one the younger man. And uh, the object was levitating. It wasn't flying exactly. No motors, no sound. It was just like a cylinder or something or egg shape. And they were inside and in two different rooms, separated. And they described it as just being full of light. And they couldn't basically see much because of all the light and brightness. And both of them described like they were surveyed, or like the light went, an eye type thing came around them and scanned them. And then they were released. And after they were released, uh, they were still just having a nervous breakdown. And Calvin was standing at the end of the pier with his arms out like he was just, his nerves were just wiped out.
Yeah.
And um, uh, Charlie couldn't walk at first, and then he finally got up and walked, and he finally, got um, Calvin out of his ordeal of standing there like that.
Mm.
And they were terrified, of course, at the time because they didn't know if they were going to be captured or taken and put in a zoo or killed or anything else.
So there are a lot of theories, aren't there, about what because there was sort of humanoid figures involved, weren't there, which were faceless as far as I can gather, and very tall as well, well over normal sort of adult man height. From what I can gather, they sort of towered over both Calvin and.
No, they were kind of short. They were more like 5 feet tall.
All right, okay, okay. They were the ones that came out to the craft and took Calvin and Charlie inside, though. Is that right?
Yes, uh-huh. They were well built. I mean, lots of people describe aliens as skinny little things. So these were like chunky, heavy set things,
Yeah,
football players or something.
because there are some theories that they were possibly military tech. What's your thoughts on that?
Um, yeah, there were theories of that, but they didn't match their description because their description was that this thing, it didn't have a sound like jets or an airplane or anything else. It was a slight humming or zipping sound, and it levitated, and so did the beings. The beings just levitated them in.
Weren't there some independent witnesses as well of the craft? Wasn't
There
there?
were twins. Usually with abductions, they take place out in the middle of nowhere, um, and where there's nothing else. In this case, we found all kinds of witnesses. For example, the police department there said that that night um, they received probably over 50 calls of people reporting something, and they wouldn't be influenced by anything because they didn't know anything had happened yet.
Hmm.
They were just reporting when they saw something. And then we found about 50 more. So there, that that I've interviewed. So we've um, found a lot more. So there might have been 100 witnesses that reported, and there were probably tons and tons of witnesses that didn't say anything.
Yeah, that didn't report it because they didn't either know what it was or didn't want to be accused of being laughed at in effect because obviously if they said it was a UFO, um, back in those days, people were a little less accepting of those sort of claims as perhaps they are today. Maybe if it had happened, something like that happened today, people will be a little bit more open to possibly what was going on. You mentioned interviews. Are there any particular interviews that stand out then as being particularly compelling?
What'd you say?
Wait, you mentioned that you were involved in some interviews with witnesses.
Yeah,
Which ones then sort of stick in your mind as being particularly compelling?
well, there were a number of witnesses that same night, and one of them that seemed pretty compelling was a man that worked for the shipbuilding company there, and he had a higher position and he knew what was going on and the uh, classified things. And he and a car full of people saw something at about the same time and place, and he knew that this is a big deal. And he tried to report it at work, and everybody laughed at him. And he called the airport, and everybody laughed at him. And he had a good position and everything, and he knew that they were doing classified work there and everything else, that they should be very, very interested. And nobody listened to him at all.
So, did Charles Hickson take a polygraph test? Am I reading that right from the notes I've got?
Well, they were reported as in the newspapers as both of them taking tests. They wanted the tests. And then somebody said, oh, the test didn't count because the tester wasn't qualified. But they took the test and passed them.
Right. Okay. So what's your thoughts on the whole incident then? Do you think it was definitely an alien abduction, or do you think there was something else going on? Do you think they were in the wrong place at the wrong time?
Well, from the number of witnesses and the fact that it was very hard to report things back then because not only did people get harassed if they even said UFOs, there basically wasn't a place to report them to. And like Charles tried 3 times before he got his report in. And considering that and the number of people that reported, there was definitely something there.
What do you think it was?
A UFO.
Without doubt, you're convinced it was a UFO.
Well, a UFO is something you don't know what it is. And
Yeah, good answer.
my opinion, I don't know what it was.
Silly question and a very good answer. Okay, so how many times did you sort of speak to both Calvin and Charlie, and what sort of characters were they? What sort of men did you find them when you spoke to them?
I didn't speak to him. I just spoke to Calvin once, and Charlie was dead.
Right.
Um, but everybody, uh, Pascagoula isn't a big place, and the people that knew him, both, and Philip, of course, too, everybody had high opinions of him as being honest and not lying and not hoaxing. And I think people that knew him had a real high opinion of him.
Yeah. So there's no possibility at all that the story could have been made up, or certain elements of the story could have been made up to shall we say, gain notoriety.
They got accused of that, but like Calvin didn't want to talk about it. And
Mm.
at first, they didn't want their names used or anything. They certainly didn't want notoriety. Their first interview, they turned their backs to the camera. And Calvin didn't speak about it for about 50 years, even to his wife, but he just had terrible symptoms like mouth tick and going to the hospital with nervous breakdown and everything else.
Yeah. Did he suffer any physical side effects or adversities during his life?
Yeah, he had a lot of effects because he was kind of running away from it, and people would find out, and then, they harassed people. And, if you say you saw a UFO the next day, everybody laughs at you and say, "Oh, you see a UFO this morning," and all that.
Yeah.
And um, so he had to go through that, but he had physical effects like he had they had a document that came out right afterwards, puncture wound document, and it appeared he had a puncture wound on his foot, and his other symptoms besides the nervous breakdown were just the thing of standing stiffly with his arms out when he got back, and uh, just, I mean, everybody that saw him said he was just a wreck, that
Mm.
he was just out of his mind in fear and anxiety and everything else. It changed both of them.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tragic case, isn't it? Because he was only a very young man, wasn't he? And of course, he had to live with what had happened to him for the rest of his life. And he only passed away relatively recently, didn't he? So last few years. So he obviously had to live with it for his entire life almost, which is quite sort of tragic. So let's move on then. You've written other books as well. I mean, obviously, as I said, you've been involved in writing various books in collaboration with Philip. One of the books that you've written that I'm quite interested to chat to you about is UFO Today: 70 Years of Lies, Misinformation, and Government Cover-ups. So let's start off then. What's your feelings on disclosure?
Well, I had an article in the MUFON Journal several years ago on disclosure, and I worked at Battelle, and I knew Battelle um, at the time of Roswell, um, there was evidence that Roswell sent um, samples of materials to Wright-Patterson. Well, Battelle did a top secret study of UFOs at that time of the Project Blue Book. And at that time, Project Blue Book was debunking UFOs and saying there's nothing to it. Everybody's crazy that saw it and everything. But at the same time, the government, even though they were saying that to the public, were doing a very highly classified study of the subject from Blue Book at Battelle Memorial Institute. And Battelle was supposed to uh, develop a questionnaire on how to question the witnesses and get the best precise information and analyze the data. But where the people that did the actual study weren't in that type of position at all. Instead, they were metallurgists.
Right.
And Battelle had real top metallurgists because they'd worked on the Manhattan Project and all kinds of things.
Right.
And so people wondered about that, especially people at Battelle. But they had this Robertson panel meeting from the CIA, and it was supposed to be a meeting where they took all these big top scientists and they analyzed the data and figured out whether they're UFOs or not. And what they were supposed to use for the data was what Battelle was from the Battelle study. But this classified memo came out from Battelle that somebody leaked, a whistleblower leaked, or maybe two or three, that Battelle wasn't finished with a study. And they said, don't go do Robertson panel because you're supposed to use our data and we haven't analyzed it. So the government went right ahead with the Robertson study, whether they had data or not, and said, no UFOs, tell everybody they're crazy if they see them and everything. Well, this was really good disclosure because it showed that the government was lying in several ways. They were saying no UFOs and all that while they were doing a top secret study. And then the study showed positive results, which they obscured in that too. But this was 1953, but it was just a real good disclosure back then. But then in the last disclosure type thing, it was due to the Nemitz and Princeton Tic Tac object and all that. And in my latest book that I just published, I mentioned that had something to do with Pascagoula because the ships involved were built by the company in Pascagoula.
All right. What, the Navy ships?
Uh-huh.
All right. Okay. So is there a big naval shipyard at Pascagoula?
Well, that's what my new book is about. Here it is, if you can see it.
Yeah.
It's about the military, and all this time they've said, why do these people see UFOs there? I mean, what's going on there? And they harassed the people that saw it and all that. Well, I realized that they were by a really big, important nuclear site. And nobody knew it, and nobody realized it and thought about it because it's a shipbuilder, and you don't think of you think of nuclear sites as being missile sites or like Hanover or something. Nobody'd think of a shipbuilder being a nuclear site. But they were building nuclear subs, and at the time of the sighting, not only nuclear subs, but ones with nuclear missiles.
Right.
And so this was comparatively like a missile site, which gets all kinds of attention, but nobody realized this was a nuclear missile site, that the sighting was beside. And some of the people that worked there also had sightings. So
Right.
I think the sighting should be reclassified as a nuclear sighting instead of you know, just a fisherman sighting.
Yeah. So have there been sightings since 1973? Have there been sightings, other sightings?
Yeah, there were other sightings, and one important one was a, a USO, an underwater um, submarine type sighting, unidentified sighting. And about several weeks later, just about the same place, these people saw USO, and it was underwater. It would light up. They poked it with oars that sounded metallic. It If they punched it and bothered it, it would move someplace else and light up again. And these fishermen couldn't figure out what they were, so they went out and got um, the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard came, and the Coast Guard people, officers, investigated, and they couldn't figure it out either. And they did a real serious investigation compared to the one that was done with Charlie and Calvin. And the Coast Guard man said one unusual thing was is that when they put an oar out over it, that the light just went to the oar from it instead of casting a shadow. And the Coast Guard officers had no idea what it was, neither did anybody else. And that was right afterwards, just weeks afterwards. And then off and on, there's been other sightings all through history.
So what's the most recent sighting then?
What?
What's the most recent sighting?
I don't know. I can't.
Okay, but fairly recent.
There's so many I can't.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
I don't have an index in my mind on the dates, so
Okay.
I
But
could I
yeah,
could answer if I went through things, but I don't know now.
no, that's fine. But sort of like within the last 5 years, something like that.
I think so, but
Yeah. Okay.
I would have to think through a whole lot of reports. I just don't.
Okay. Fair enough. So apart from trying to cover up the existence of UFOs by the government, various governments. I mean, our government has done exactly the same as the American government over the years. They've covered up. We've got our own um, instances of UFO crashes. We have Rendlesham Forest incident. We have the Penchurch, I can never say that word, Penchurch incident, which are all very similar to Roswell, and of course they've all been covered up by our government. Um, I mean, how deep does the misinformation go from governments? Do you think governments are in collaboration across the globe? Sorry, that's my one of my cocker spaniels. That's why I opened the door before she wanted to come in. She likes to have a lie down on the chair when I'm doing podcasts. Um, yeah. So do you think governments are working together to cover up the real truth?
Uh, well, I had back when I was working with Defense Intelligence Agency, I had this real high clearance, and uh, I analyzed data from the satellites that were going around, and uh, looked at uh, airplanes. And actually, my supervisors reported a UFO to their supervisors, and it was a pretty good thing because you could see it in stereo and things. Well, their supervisors said it didn't exist. They said it was a spot on the film. It was on two films, though. And so they tried to prove to the supervisors that it was right, and they got some scientists to study and said it's not a spot on the film, it's something real. And so their supervisors kept on telling them, no, just like they tell civilians, if you see a UFO, the government says you didn't see it. Well, they say the same thing inside the government. And I talked to several of the people that had sightings of UFOs at the missile sites, when they turned off the missiles and things. And the government totally ignored it, which suggests to me, I mean, from my own experience and theirs, that somewhere high in the government there's a cover up, but it doesn't include it's way up. Um, because like my supervisors were high up too, and they would know whether they were seeing a real object or not, and they reported it. And their supervisors said, no, it's a spot on the film. So somewhere there's they should respect their opinions instead of telling them something that made no sense at all.
Yeah. So somewhere in government there's a level that anything below that, these things don't exist in effect. And obviously that's coming down from above. Um, do you think, and I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about the current president. I'm talking about president as in you know, historically. Do you think the presidents know about what's really happening, or do you think it's even kept from them? Do you think there's government departments which are even higher above than the president that are keeping this information quiet?
Well, I sort of discussed that in some of my books and things. Um, in my latest book, I talked about mind control,
Mm.
that there was evidence in this Pascagoula that objects could exert mind control over people. And I asked the question, could there be mind control at the top of the government? Um, because there'll be sightings of people that see a UFO and they'll be with somebody, and one person sees a UFO and the other person doesn't remember anything about it. And in a lot of cases, like Bud Hopkins' missing time, um, people may see UFOs and not know anything about it. And so I was just curious, and I know this is crazy to say, but it's still something I wonder about. Could there be mind control at the top levels of the government, or why on earth? I mean, they're very sensitive about anything nuclear sites and all that. But if a UFO floats over a nuclear site, well, they don't seem concerned at all, which is totally illogical.
Mm.
And missile sites and everything else like that. They should investigate that.
Yeah, but they don't. So
No.
why do you think that is?
Well, that was why I was saying maybe there's some mind control at the top of the government from UFOs or something. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but it was just speculation. Um, but another reason is historical, and that's because when UFOs first began to be reported, they were classified as foreign and not classified as alien. They were classified, I forget the name, FTD was the Foreign Technology Division of Wright-Patterson. And um, they came in as a military and looking at things that came from other countries. And so, due to being in the military, everything in the military is classified. And so, that historically, there may be a reason why it is classified and continued being classified and all that, because they're probably still trying to figure out whether they come from a foreign country, although I very much doubt it.
Yeah, it's interesting that a lot of the sightings tend to be around either military installations or nuclear facilities or research facilities. We have the big sightings, the big historical sightings that we've had in the UK here have all been around military installations or research facilities, nuclear power stations as well. And it sounds very much like that's a similar sort of thing over in America, in the States. And I would imagine probably in places like China and Russia as well, that obviously don't report them.
Yeah, if in a secure area, you can't report them. I mean, in Pascagoula, they were there by a military site, and um, the company that Calvin and Charles worked for. Part of it was owned by the um, Huntington Ingalls company, which is the nuclear sub company, and they didn't back in those days they didn't want anybody to know about nuclear sites,
Mm.
and so if there were people in there that um, knew about the sighting, they would have kept quiet, and the government would have kept quiet, and ridiculed the sighters instead of saying this is a nuclear site and there are people um, seeing this UFO. And there were reports of a UFO went and circled one of the buildings in the site during working hours, and that came from somebody that worked there.
So when did
It
that?
was, I think it was just a few days after the
Oh,
abduction.
okay, that's interesting. What was the sort of authorities' reaction to that then? Did they just try to
He
brush
didn't
that
say
off as
anything
well?
as far as I can tell.
Mm.
He told his family, and his family told us, but um, I don't think he said anything at work. But there were other people that saw it at work.
Yeah.
But the one man I talked about that saw the UFO that worked for the company, he would have known that they were making nuclear subs, and he didn't say anything about the company or anything. But he was just amazed that nobody paid attention to it, and here it was a nuclear site. But he didn't say in public this is a nuclear site or anything.
Was it not common knowledge then that there was that it was a nuclear facility?
Oh, I'm sure it wasn't.
Right. Yeah, because that's the first I've heard of that, to be honest. So yeah, interesting that.
I think it would have there would have been a lot more attention on it, and it would have been reclassified if they realized it was a nuclear site, and nobody did.
Yeah. I wonder if the law if the local people who lived in the area knew what was going on there, who didn't work there. That's what I'm
No,
wondering.
I don't think they did
No.
because, like in Ohio here, there were nuclear sites that did high level nuclear stuff and were disguised. And there was one not too far away that I kind of worked on that it was called a feed material plant, and they had a checkerboard design on its water tower, they were making animal feed and stuff. And it was a really high nuclear site of making really high grade uranium and things, but nobody knew about it. They thought it was a cattle feed company
Right.
disguised.
Wow. Interesting. Okay, so whereabouts are your books available?
They're available on Amazon.com, and they're also um, mentioned on Phillips Flying Disc um, site.
Website as well. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
What's your website is irenascott.com.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
I
there's
have all my books listed, except I don't have my last one in.
yeah. One one final question. There's a book on here that I have to ask you. Um, is God really a woman?
Yeah. The truth.
True. Go on. How do you know?
That's how God came in as a woman, the creator of us all by giving birth to the human race.
Okay. Well, religion isn't something that I tend to go into too much on the podcast, I must admit, but it does. I mean, it looks. It's probably I'm sure it's a fantastic read, and it's something that I may well be tempted to read myself, just out of curiosity, I think, as to what your rationale behind God being a woman is. So. But there's plenty of really interesting books on there. We've got Aliens and the Apocalypse, Beyond Reasonable Doubt, Beyond Pascagoula, UFO Today's. The story continues, Pascagoula, Calvin Parker, and obviously there's your new book as well. So there's plenty of reading material there if people want to seek out your work, which is obviously very interesting. You've obviously had a very interesting career, uh, very rich career, if you don't mind me saying, very interesting. And it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. So thank you for coming on the podcast.
Well, my career was I tried to be an astronomer and they didn't let females in astronomy for a long time. And so that's why my career routed around through different things. But thank you very much for having me.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I think the Pascagoula incident is something that I have spoken to other people about over the course of the podcast since I've been doing it. Um, it always seems to throw up new questions, which I think is the interesting thing about the whole incident. That there seems to be new evidence coming forward all the time, and I think it's something that is going to be. It's one of those endearing mysteries, I think, that people are going to be interested in for a long time to come. And obviously, the more research that's done and the more books that are written on it, I think that can only be a good thing. So, thank you for the work that you've done on it. I think it's a really interesting subject, and I think it's probably one of the most famous UFO abduction cases ever. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think discovering that it's a nuclear site, I think adds a lot of dimension to it that nobody realized because nuclear sites are taken seriously. And this was always sort of joked about, but this is a much more serious site than I think people realized.
Yeah, it certainly adds a lot more credibility to it, doesn't it? A lot more weight to it, a lot more gravitas to the whole incident. So, well, it's been a pleasure to speak to you, Irena. Thank you very much for coming on, and keep up the good work. Keep up the writing, and keep up the collaborations with Philip as well.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been a honor and everything.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.